And inclusion is largely depends on affordable communication. Inclusion largely depends on communications in one's own capacity and language and content. Otherwise, you can have a huge terabyte optical fiber backbone, but that may not mean anything to someone sitting on the last leg. And that actually takes you to the third step, which is, within communication you have radio, other things, but why ICTs today? Or why this convergence today? That's because ICTs inherently offer, at least has the potential, inherent potential, that's probably the cautious term. ICTs have the inherent potential to offer unprecedented opportunities in terms of inclusion. I mean, despite its current limitations, because in most internet the established language for internet is English and so on and so forth, despite its limitations, if you look at, for example, things like, the most sensational example I'm going to quote, forgive me for that, if you look at WikiLeaks, the reason, the way that it has actually reached so many people on that level of inclusion is only possible because of ICTs. That's such a very flimsy, superficial example, but I'm just giving you because we are so familiar, we're close to that right now. But the point I'm trying to make is that ICTs offer that potential, but what does it take to make that dream, the reality really happen? So in my view, what I think within ICTs, there are 3 or 4 layers where inclusion should be focused and concentrated. First is structural inclusion, which is all about rolling out structure, which is, I think, Government of India, in partnership with private sectors, is doing an enormous great job. 5-6 years ago, there was a very, if you compare in terms of structure and ICT networks and ISP providers, and comparing that with now, India has come a very long way, and much to envy of other developing societies. So it still has a long way to go, but I think the structural inclusion is on the right track in my view. But there might be lots of questions about pricing, transparency, open networks or closed networks, but this is not a place to go into details. But I'm just pointing it out that that's happening. The second, linked to structural inclusion is financing the structure. Again, it's a huge area, but it is happening with some reservations, which I'm not going to go into detail here. Number 2 and 3 is the most relevant, pertinent points for this particular session: content and capacities. If you look at ICT policies in late 90s and early 2000s, people always emphasized on ICT policy in terms of explosion of structure, explosion of putting out pipelines everywhere to ensure people have access to internet and so on, or ICT connections, so on and so forth. But now the redefined strategy clearly tells us it's not just that. Yes, it is important, but you need to put the right kind of stuff in the pipeline. Otherwise, the pipeline is almost as non-existent. Therefore, it's important that content should be in a language that's actually accessible to the people who are living in the margins. Otherwise, it will be difficult to take this benefits to the people living in margins. Talking of content, we are also acutely aware of the fact people living in the margins may not be able to access content in the way that we expect them to access, because literacy comes to play and gender politics come to play. Therefore, capacities is another thing. So in my view, content and capacities are 2 sides of the coin. You cannot leave one and promote the other. So the reason why I think content and capacities is crucial for future inclusion, eventually leading to better inclusive development, is because there are a couple of trends I'm beginning to notice purely because there is not adequate local content. I'll give you a very hands-on example. I'm a Tamil speaker, and I as a result, when I'm in London, I'm extremely curious to read stuff in Tamil, and especially Tamil newspaper and Tamil magazines. And it's very, I wouldn't say sad, but it is very surprising to see that Tamil magazines are becoming, almost all magazines are becoming online as paid content. Because they know that the content is scarce online. And if you, on the contrary, if you look at New York Times, it's free online. And I can say that I'm sure the New York Times content is somewhat better in quality than a very juicy Tamil magazine. Except for my own diasporic identity crisis, I don't think that it's something that I'm going to gain a lot more, but you wouldn't believe, I don't know if there is any Tamil speaker here, okay, and you know, there's this magazine called Kumudam. They charge phenomenal amount online. And they get that money. They get that money because, I'll tell you why. It is not, the Kumudam is, that particular magazine is not actually putting out content that is exclusive of nature, that has a particular niche. No, it's a sheer rubbish garbage. Cinema gossip, blah, blah, blah. But even that level of content is not available. I don't mean to say that, you know, people don't put that content, but structure is an impediment. Software is an impediment. Content, you know, people who are actively putting on content is an impediment. There's lack of capacities. So all this push a society to create an artificial market which are going to unfavor the people living in the margins. So if more and more people are moving into online content, this is therefore Tamil, I mean, I'm just making up a very extreme case, Tamil online content will be more expensive than English, which is bizarre. If you look at market, there are more English users, there should be more people paying for English content, but it looks the other way. So that's an interesting point. And as a result, if we don't actually actively work on content, we run the risk of creating elitism in the internet world, in the ICT world. And I think that elitism is going to be severely damaging to people living in margins. And we will be pushing people completely outside the area of benefits. And therefore, by creating this elitism, there will be exclusive networks, which is quite the opposite of the fundamental internet principles, which should be open and to be accessible by everyone. So that's again a very sad thing. So people, I hope, who will be presenting today, I would like to congratulate them in advance, regardless of the outcome of, you know, in terms of competition prize, because what I'm excited to hear about, it's one of the revolutionary, you know, intervention. I mean, revolutionary by it may not resemble like Che Guevara types, but in its own sense, it's extremely revolutionary. And so therefore, I mean, the examples that we are waiting to hear will demonstrate, no, ICT will not become an anti-poor tool. It will become for the people living in margins. And we already have an example, which is mobile phones. Mobile phones, you know, the way that, you know, it has been rolled out because of its accessibility, because of its affordability, because of its adaptability, it just taken on board. It has caused a huge amount of revolution, but still, mobile phone still has a long way to go. I think the more and more we push in new technologies, the more and more we push new communication technologies in terms of inclusion, I think that's the lens we must use all the time. As long as that happens, I really think that, you know, all I can imagine is a very inclusive and somewhat a world in which people living in margins can easily challenge people with power. And that's, I would call, a real substantive democracy that we can hope for. I mean, that's the kind of a context that I'd like to set in, and I'm really looking forward to hear your examples, how those examples achieve these sort of dreams and into realities. So thank you.
Thank you, Murali. And